So a few years ago, Luca Lampariello created this video where he argues why you should take a language learning test. However, I mostly disagree with what he says in that video and with the fundamental premise that taking a language learning test is a good idea. So in this video, I've decided to lay out the arguments as to why I think that way. Let's do it. Hi, my name is Julian and welcome to my channel where I do videos about language learning. So a few months ago, I was very close to taking the DALF C1 exam, so this type of official certification for French. But in the end, I did not do it because I realized that all of the time that I was gonna have to put into preparing the exam, plus the cost of taking that exam, that certification, was not going to be worth it. And today I want to lay out the way I thought when reasoning that way. So before starting with the arguments, one caveat: this video is intended for people who are thinking of taking language exams in order to put themselves to the proof, to push themselves to be a little bit better in that language. It's not intended for people who actually have to take a language exam in order to, let's say, get a residence permit in one country or in order to get a job in one country. I think that in those cases, it might make more sense to take the exam. But as I said, I'm not gonna focus on that latter type of cases. So let's start off with the positive arguments, which are in a way similar to the ones that Luca laid forward in his video. So the first one is that taking an official examination is an excellent commitment device because you're paying a lot of money, like 200 euros, 250 or 300 sometimes, in order to be able to take that exam, which means that now you are pushing yourself, you are forcing yourself to take it seriously because of all the money that you have invested on it, right? It's like the same way that any sort of commitment device works. So given that you have put so much money into it, you better pass the exam, right? And get the certification, because otherwise this money would have sort of been squandered. And this leads me to the second very positive thing that taking this sort of examination has, which is that you are setting very specific goals, right? Because you know that you have the writing test, you're gonna have to do some speaking as well, you'll have to do some reading, etc. And this forces you to actually work specifically in each of those language learning domains, right? So now you're probably gonna be smarter in your studies because you are going to have to set specific goals, which are goals that you might not have set in such a specific way if you were studying on your own and without having this sort of clear goal. So now instead of only, let's say, listening to podcasts when you have a little bit of free time every day, you're gonna be forced to devote maybe a little bit more time in the evenings and to do some other types of activities instead, because you'll have to practice your writing and your reading skills as well, right? And also having these clear goals will also force you to split the time properly between now and the time of the exam, and thus to set small specific goals in between. And this will all greatly help you in making progress in the language. And maybe the final point that I'd like to make, also related to what I've said so far, is that you're gonna get loads of feedback and very specific, right? So during your preparation, while doing the exercises that you're gonna do in order to prepare for the exam, and also at the time of doing the exam, you're gonna get specific feedback about the points where you're weaker at and the points where you're better at, right? Either because of the scores that you get in the final exam or because of the feedback that you get from the teacher that you have who's helping you prepare for that exam, right? So yes, there are definitely tangible benefits from taking this sort of official exam. The point is that you can get most of those benefits without actually having to do the exam by just maybe preparing yourself for the exam, using the materials that are available online in order to prepare yourself for it, being specific about the goals and so on, but without having to incur in the costs related to it. Okay, so what are those costs I'm referring to? Well, the first one is, and as I've already hinted at, the high price of the exam, right? Because in most of the cases, it can cost 200 and 250 euros, which I guess that for most people listening to this video is going to be a considerable amount of money. So, okay, maybe 200, 250 euros is not that much. It's not that big of a deal. The thing is that if you start taking this sort of official exams in order to test yourself and in order to push yourself in the languages that you're learning, then it might start accumulating and you might end up spending a lot of money in this type of official exams. Let's say you want to take the exam for the B1 in one language, then you go for the B2 or directly to the C1. Okay, then you have already taken 2 exams in that language. What about you start learning another language? Because people who are watching this channel are very passionate about learning languages. So you're probably going to learn another one in the future, or 2 more or 3 more, right? So if you start taking this approach of, I'm going to take language exams in order to force myself to improve my level, then you're probably going to end up spending a lot of money on it over the years. And on top of that, you have to think of the opportunity cost you are incurring when taking this sort of exam, right? Because you could have spent those 250 euros in, let's say, language learning material, in language learning courses, and paying an ITALKI teacher, for instance. And maybe spending that amount of money in this alternative way I just mentioned is going to help you even more in improving the level of your language. So the second negative thing I see with this sort of exams, and this might be the most controversial part of the video, is that they force you to develop certain skills that are sort of useless nowadays, or that have been, let's say, rendered useless today because of technology. And what I'm talking about specifically here is, for instance, about writing. Because nowadays with ChatGPT and even Google Translate, you can get texts in an excellent quality written by, let's say, the large language model. And it is probably gonna do it better than you unless you have a, let's say, C2 level on the language. And it's also going to do it quicker than you, right? So given that these tools are available and given that they can do an excellent job at writing, why the hell would you want to practice writing in a foreign language to try to get excellent at it, when even if you get good at it, even if you get to a level that is sort of B2, you are going to write it way slower than ChatGPT would do it. And secondly, you will not write it at the level of ChatGPT. So I'm saying this from my own experience. So my level in German when writing is excellent because I've been living here in Germany for 3 years and I've been practicing writing for a long time. The thing is that even when I make the effort of writing a text in German and I make the effort of polishing it and not making any mistakes, even in that case, firstly, it takes me a lot of time to sort of polish it and make sure that I don't make any, let's say, grammar mistakes or spelling mistakes or whatever. But then when I take this text I've written and I put it on ChatGPT, I can immediately see that the machine does it better than myself, that it makes tangible improvements on what I've written. Even though, as I said, my level is very high, it's like probably a C1, something like that. So I've invested a lot of time in writing in German, which, I mean, I don't regret as of now, but the thing is, why would you try to get super accurate when writing, and why would you want to, let's say, memorize or learn some grammar rules and making sure that you don't make any spelling mistakes when the machine is actually going to do it better and faster than you, even if you spend and invest a lot of time into improving your writing skills? In my opinion, it doesn't make much sense, right? But the thing is that if you take this sort of exam, you are forced to working on your writing skills. You're forced to try to write without any spelling mistakes, and you are forced to remembering these structures of, let's say, I have to write a letter for the mayor, right? So they make you practice this very rigid schema of, I write the letter to the mayor and then I have this sort of greeting and then I have to end the letter this way and so on, which on top of what I just said, right, is also kind of useless because when the hell are you gonna write a letter to the mayor, right? And even if that was the case, again, you could take templates from the internet very easily, but no, in these types of exams, you can't take any templates from home. You just have to memorize all these things and then just implement them in the exam, which again, on top of all of the things I've said before, is also a waste of time, in my opinion. And just to wrap it up and tie it back to the point I've made before about the opportunity cost of money, this time you're investing in writing and improving your writing skills also has an opportunity cost, right? Because you could be investing that time in skills that might be more useful and still, let's say, unique from humans, such as speaking, right? Which is one of the main goals we as language learners have. Like, we actually want to speak. Most of us, like, our main goal is to be able to speak a language fluently, right? But if you're just focusing a lot on writing, or at least putting a considerable amount of energy into improving your writing skills, then you're not investing that into actually improving your speaking skills, which is probably, I guess, what most of you want to do. So yeah, this sort of official examination forces you to put a lot of time into improving your writing and on improving your reading, which is something I haven't talked about, but that nowadays, with all the technologies that are available, is not that useful anymore, because you can translate any text back into English or into your mother tongue, right? So unless you derive a lot of pleasure from writing in a foreign language or from learning how to write in a foreign language, I think that this point I've been making so far is a strong one against taking this sort of official examination. And finally, the third argument against taking official examinations is that they might give you the feeling that you're sort of done with the language, and thus it might not incentivize you to continue learning after you have taken the exam. So let's say you're preparing for a B2 or C1 exam in whatever language you're studying right now. So you prepare for it for like 4 or 6 months or something like that. It takes you a lot of effort, you improve your level in the language, and you end up taking the exam. And what about afterwards? Well, probably you might sort of subconsciously leave the language aside, right? Because now you have already achieved a very good level, right? You have been certified to be good, to be very good at the language, you have gotten a C1 certification. So at least marginally, or to a certain extent, you are probably going to lose the motivation of working on that language, on continuing to improve that tongue. And this is not an ideal scenario, because you want to work on your language every now and then so that it doesn't get rusty. Because if you don't work on it for like 6 months or 1 year and then you suddenly have to use it, it's going to be a bit rusty, and you might have lost some of the things you learned for that, let's say, C1 exam you took 1 year ago. All right, let's summarize. One of the main reasons I believe you probably shouldn't take that language certification, language exam, is that preparing for it is going to force you to work on certain skills and abilities that are not that necessary, or not necessary at all, to develop in today's world. I'm mostly talking here about working on your writing skills, but also on your reading skills. So the time you are gonna end up investing in improving those skills that are not that important could actually be invested in, let's say, learning another language, or on improving another language learning domain which is more relevant, such as speaking. On top of that, this sort of examinations cost more or less 250 euros, which is a lot of money, and which has an opportunity cost. Like, you could be using that money to buying language learning resources, for instance, or to paying a language learning teacher. And on top of that, like, if you start taking these sorts of exams, then you'll actually end up spending loads of money over a long period of time, right? And although there are certain benefits associated to taking this type of tests, you can actually take those benefits without the need of taking the exam. Because you could just prepare for the exam without actually taking the exam. So you would, in that case, be very specific with your goals and be sort of motivated towards this exam that you are not going to end up taking. And you're gonna thus learn a lot and improve the level of your target language. So I hope you found this video useful and that it made you rethink whether to take that examination or not. If that was the case, just give it a thumbs up and share it with someone. All right, thanks, and see you next time.